Not far from the Estonian village of Letipea, a monument stands in the middle of a picturesque meadow. On the granite pedestal, the date August 8, 1976 is engraved, along with the names of the people who died at this place. What happened here in that distant yet quite peaceful time? And why? After this incident, the Baltic states literally rebelled, demanding that the chairman of the KGB of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Yuri Andropov, remove all border outposts from the territory of the Republic. The details of the terrible tragedy are in today's video. Letipea is an unremarkable little village like many others in Estonia. Birch forests and beautiful meadows stretch all around. The clean air and untouched natural pink glacial waves of enormous size have long attracted travelers and tourists from all over the Soviet Union. On August 7, 1976, the annual gathering of the families of gas industry workers of the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic was held on the shore of the Gulf of Finland, near this village. This beloved 2 or 3 day event for gas workers was a traditional celebration, and it had been successfully held since 1970. It was a celebration with songs and dances, sports games and competitions, and evening gatherings with a guitar by the campfire. Of course, there was alcohol, but only in moderate amounts. This time, they decided to organize the gathering on the grounds adjacent to the recreation center owned by the public traffic inspectors from Rakvere. The recreation center was located in close proximity to the maritime border with Finland. A Soviet border outpost was situated just 1.5 kilometers away. Therefore, the organizers coordinated the dates of the event and other details with the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics Border Service and obtained permission from the head of the District Executive Committee. Estonian journalist and eyewitness Anatama recalls, "The control was very strict. People who were going to the resort were put on lists and checked for reliability. The KGB was always informed. After all, you could never rule out the possibility of a provocation from the Finnish special services. Each visitor signed a non-disclosure agreement. A large area was allocated for the Congress and the attendees were not allowed to leave it. Swimming was also only permitted in one designated spot on the coast. Most of the 344 tourists arrived at the camp and set up their tents in the evening. August 6, 1976. The rest arrived the next morning. The place was picturesque, an extensive meadow on the shore of the bay. The beautiful Baltic nature and warm summer days promised the visitors a wonderful celebration, recalls Taima Kivila, a resident of the village of Letipea. From early morning, vacationers began to arrive, almost all with their families and children. Young people came with guitars and inflatable swim rings. We brought out vegetables, berries, cheese and eggs for sale. The festival usually spanned 2 to 3 days, attracting a large, cheerful and friendly crowd. Alcohol was sold on the territory of the recreation center. According to the product documentation, before the gathering, the local store received 820 bottles of vodka, 160 bottles of cognac and liqueur, 776 bottles of wine, and 1,740 bottles of beer. Lieutenant Leo Tiri, the deputy commander of the border detachment, went to the site of the festive event for an inspection early in the morning. The day of August 7th at the camp began with the official part of the gathering organized near the headquarters building. After listening to the management's instructions, the tourists scattered around the area where a variety of entertainments had been organized for them. Leo Tiri was well acquainted with the base administrator Alex Riho. After exchanging a handshake, they went up to the porch, looking over all the arriving participants of the gathering. "Alex, have many people already arrived?" the border guard asked quietly. "There will be more than 200 every year." So the Estonian looked intently at Leo. Leo Tiri was serving at this outpost for the first year, and such a gathering in an area close to the border was unusual for him. "I have a request for you, Alex," Leo said seriously, looking at the administrator. "If you notice any of the visitors with an inflatable boat or something like that, let me know immediately." Alex Rika barely suppressed a smirk, trying not to laugh. He remembered the incident 3 years ago when 2 young guys and a girl tried to cross the bay at night in a boat to get to Finland. Back then, the fugitives were barely caught on the Finnish shore, almost causing a conflict with the local border guards. There was a lot of commotion, and many officials lost their positions and ranks. Of course, Comrade Thierry, there's no need to worry, I will definitely warn you. They were silent for a while, watching a car pull up with 3 pretty girls inside. I heard you got a lot of good booze delivered, Leo continued in a cheerful, relaxed voice. That's right, Comrade Lieutenant, would you like to check it out? Alexei nodded slyly to the border guard, inviting him to come into the store. The sale of alcohol to military personnel on the territory of the tourist base was strictly prohibited, but exceptions sometimes happened. And this time, Leo Thierry came out from Alexei's place with a big bag in which something was softly clinking. Taking his time, after putting it on the back seat of the UAZ, the captain waved to Alexei and the vehicle drove toward the shore, where the newcomers were already unpacking their things, setting up tents and inflating mattresses for swimming. The heat in those days was unbearable. Walking through the tent camp, he greeted the head of the gas workers, Anatoly Varka, and for protocol checked the permits for visiting. Comrade Varka, I must warn you that employees of your office who are on vacation are strictly forbidden to leave the camp or go toward the bay, Leo Thierry said sternly. Don't worry, Comrade Lieutenant. All my employees have been coming to the festival for years and they know the rules, Anatoly Varka assured him. After inspecting the shoreline, Leo Thierry did not find any suspicious watercraft. Satisfied with his patrol, he returned to the outpost to show off the Vana Tallinn signature liqueur he had acquired to the head of the border outpost, Lieutenant Colonel Edgar Tommy. He was overjoyed and immediately, in honor of the occasion, suggested tasting the elite drink. Setting the table right in the office, they started enjoying the treat without waiting for the evening. Meanwhile, not far from the recreation center, 2 border guards from the 3rd outpost of the 6th Border Detachment were on duty. Viktor Bagidzev and Nikolai Povishev, a 20-year-old native of the Tatar Soviet Socialist Republic. Bagidzev and his peer from Perm, Povishev, were friends. They started serving together in 1974 and were supposed to be discharged in 1976. The service went by without any major incidents. They had never seen spies or border violators in person, so they weren't used to being on edge. Another August, Viktor Bagidzev received a large money transfer from his relatives. The comrades decided not to waste any time. They stopped by the store at the tourist base, and Alex Rika kindly agreed to help his friends buy some alcohol. The price was a bit higher than in the store, but the border guards weren't bothered by that, since they weren't officially allowed to buy it anyway. The resourceful Estonian brought out about a dozen bottles of vodka and liqueur through the back door, and after receiving a considerable amount of cash, he was quite pleased. Sitting in the middle of a potato field, they leisurely poured vodka into their glasses and snacked on army beef stew. It's nice here, muttered Viktor Bagidzev, leaning back, sinking into the lush soft grass and looking up at the cloudless August sky. He imagined how soon he would return home to his native village. It'll be even better soon, replied Nikolai Povishev, hooking a big piece of meat out of the jar. In the evening, the gas workers will start having fun. Songs, dancing, while our shift will be over. Viktor whistled cheerfully, wondering how he hadn't thought of that idea himself. We'll relax there like we do back home and meet some girls, Nikolai continued, pouring himself another glass. But what if Thierry shows up there with a steam inspector? Viktor asked worriedly, sitting up a little. He's one of those guys, an Estonian, he likes order, and he will show up. He went there in the morning, saw his UAZ through binoculars. Nikolai smirked as he handed the next round to his friend. Viktor Bagidzev took the offered glass and, to the words, "to a quick discharge," drained it to the bottom. Closer to evening, the gas workers lit campfires and set tables with simple camp snacks and alcohol. Estonia has always been famous for its natural liqueurs and excellent sprats, recalls Andres Nur, an employee of the Rakvere gas company. Everyone was having a great time. Some were swimming, others were playing soccer, and children were running among the tents playing hide and seek. The adults were preparing a festive dinner over the campfire. Alcohol was consumed in moderation, no one was drunk. I personally walked around the camp, checking if all the vacationers were feeling well. Towards evening, everyone scattered to their tents and set tables. Guitars were playing, songs were being sung. The party was in full swing when the vacationers noticed two border guards approaching them. They were Viktor Bagijev and Nikolai Povishev. Both were quite tipsy. They were carrying alcohol and snacks with them. The appearance of the uninvited guests did not bother the vacationers at all. Everyone knew about the border posts and had been warned about patrols and inspections for the holidays. The friendly Estonians invited the border guards to the table, and at first everything was fine, recalls Andreas Nurk. When they approached us, the guys greeted us and it was clear that they were quite drunk. But we didn't show any aggression. On the contrary, we invited them to join us. And although this invitation was made more out of politeness, they didn't refuse and sat down by our campfire. They laid out the alcohol and food they had brought with them, had a little drink to get acquainted, and started a conversation. I was unsettled that they had assault rifles with them. Isn't it standard to turn in your weapons to the border unit after your shift? Asked the Estonian. Bagishev looked at him with a smirk and said unsteadily, "We're protecting you from all sorts of saboteurs. What if someone starts bothering your girls?" And both soldiers burst out laughing. The Estonian women present and their husbands didn't find the joke funny. Anatoly Pass, 24 years old, who was sitting across from Bagijev, stood up, his face flushed, and his eyes looked fearlessly at the drunken joker. "We can protect our wives ourselves without your help if necessary." The border guards did not expect such a tone from the calm and always composed Estonians. Both of them stood up and slowly walked toward Anatoly. He got ready to fight back. A conflict was brewing, and to avoid it, Anatoly's wife, Karin Pass, stepped between them and smiled at the frowning soldiers with poorly concealed anxiety. "Guys, let's not argue. We're relaxing and you're on duty. Let's not get in each other's way." Karin hoped that the border guards would understand her and leave, but they clearly intended to stay. Bagishev and Povishev broke into drunken, insolent smiles. "There you go, good job, what a woman you have. Does she understand who's protecting her?" Bagishev blurted. "Let me give you a kiss." With these words, he grabbed the squealing Karin and started kissing her on the lips by force. At that moment, Anatoly Pass rushed over to them and pulled his wife out of the brute's arms. Bagishev's head jerked to the side from the loud slap. Karin, rubbing her bruised palm, looked at her furious offender with hatred. "Ah, you bitch." Bagishev jerked his assault rifle off his back with a sharp movement. "What's going on here?" shouted Anatoly Vaki, the manager of the gas company, as he ran up. He was out of breath and, breathing heavily, looked at the border guard with the assault rifle in his hands in surprise. Alarmed by the shouting, vacationers were gradually gathering around. Nikolai Povishev turned pale upon seeing the assault rifle in his friend's hands. He was much more sober than his friend, and now already regretted coming to the camp with him. "What do you want?" Bagishev exhaled angrily. "Stop, what are you doing?" As he came closer, Anatoly tried to push the barrel aside but was struck hard in the face with the butt of the rifle. Falling down, he covered his face with his hands, from under which a thin stream of blood appeared. Nikolai Povishev raised his rifle and shouted in a breaking voice, "Everyone back, I'll shoot." Then turning to his friend he rasped, "Let's get out of here." But gasmen surrounded him from all sides and, snatching the rifle from his hands, threw him into the bushes. Povishev, lying on his back, put his hands forward, showing that he wouldn't continue the fight. After throwing him, the Estonians rushed at Viktor Bagishev, but he wasn't going to give up so easily. Anatoly Pass was the first to attack the border guard, trying to snatch the weapon from his hands. A shot rang out and Anatoly, bleeding, fell onto the grass. Clutching the wound on his chest, he managed to whisper, "What are you doing? We're all so young." But Bagishev didn't hear him. In a rage, he pointed his rifle at the terrified young men and started shooting. People scattered in panic, trying to hide in the tent, but the bullets caught up with them even there. Someone, running, tripped over the campfire and a burning log flew into a nearby tent. It caught fire instantly. As acrid smoke covered the clearing, Bagishev kept firing non-stop in all directions. recalls Taima Kivila, a resident of the village of Letipea who was present at the 1976 gathering. At first I couldn't even imagine it was gunfire. I thought someone had thrown a piece of slate into the fire. But when it happened again and again and we heard screams and moans, it became clear that these were gunshots. I remembered the warnings from our leader about the proximity of the Finnish border and possible provocations. I threw myself to the ground and covered my head with my hands. People were running around and children were screaming and crying. A young girl fell next to me. I turned my head and noticed blood on her shirt, but I couldn't help her. I was too scared myself and was afraid to even move. The magazine of the assault rifle was empty. Bagijev replaced it with a new one and continued shooting at the tents. Bullets were whistling, striking victims without distinguishing whether it was a man, a woman, or a child. Groans and screams could be heard everywhere, recalls N. Nevilov, a participant of the Congress of Gas Industry Workers of the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. There were 7 holes in the tent where I was sitting. I wasn't wounded, but from our group, N and Reed were hit by bullets. A woman ran into the tent, holding a frightened, crying child to her chest. I pulled them down and shielded them with my body. Groans could be heard outside. Seriously wounded people with bullets in their lungs were later taken to the Rakveri hospital in their own cars. It's not so easy to live. 2 of them didn't make it alive. Bagijev, blinded by rage and drunken frenzy, kept shooting wildly, but then Nikolai Povishev, who had come to his senses, ran up to him. He saw that his drunken friend was spraying people with lead like a madman and wanted to stop him. "Vitka, stop!" Nikolai grabbed his arm, but without realizing who it was, he pointed the barrel at him. A shot rang out, the bullet narrowly missing Nikolai's heart. He collapsed into the grass, falling silent. Seeing that he had shot his friend, Bagijev dropped his rifle and rushed to him. Bending over, he shook him by the shoulders, but he had lost consciousness. A trickle of blood was flowing from his mouth. Recoiling, Bagijev finally realized what he had done. Innocent people he had shot, young men and women, were lying all around. The walls of the tents were splattered with bloody stains, and at his feet lay the assault rifle, its barrel still smoking. Not yet cooled down, Bagijev looked once more at his fallen friend, pulled the weapon toward himself, pressed it to his head and said just one word, "Forgive me." A shot rang out and Viktor Bagijev fell next to Nikolai. When the shooting stopped, people began searching for their loved ones and bandaging the wounded. The tourists lit up the clearing where the shooting happened with their car headlights and brought all the car first aid kits to the scene of the tragedy. Many of the wounded needed urgent help to stop the bleeding. Alex's blood in the arch was brought to consciousness by a blow with a rifle butt, which badly cut his eyebrow. With a concussion and severe dizziness, he still managed to reach the border outpost. The guard opened the gate and, letting him inside, asked what had happened. He heard sounds similar to fireworks and thought that people in the tourist camp were having fun, launching fireworks. That was not fireworks. "We were shot at by border guards," Alex said, breathing heavily. And without wasting time on explanations, he ran to the headquarters. He found the officers peacefully resting right in the commandant's office. There were leftovers from dinner on the table, and the radio was quietly playing some popular hit, waking up the sleeping men. Alex sympathetically told them about the incident at the camp. Lieutenant Leotiri didn't immediately believe the anxious chief of the Estonian gas workers. "Are you drunk? What shooting? What border guards?" he said angrily. "2 soldiers. They started insulting our women. Then one of them opened fire. Many wounded, some shot dead. Comrades, officers, I'm being truthful." The outpost commander, Lieutenant Colonel Edgar Tommy, ordered us to go to the scene of the tragedy immediately. Jumping into the UAZ, both commanders rushed to the coast. They didn't want to believe what had happened until the very end. It was a group of saboteurs disguised as border guards. Drunken Estonian gas workers got into a fight with each other and started a shootout. Anything but soldiers from their garrison. Meanwhile, while first aid was being given to the injured, people at the recreation center tried to call an ambulance, but due to poor phone reception, they couldn't do it right away. Realizing that many of the wounded might not survive until the doctors arrived, the tourists decided to take them themselves in their own cars to the Rakvere and Tartu hospitals. This quick action saved the life of 24-year-old gas company driver Matti Puss. A machine gun bullet pierced his chest and got lodged in his lung. The doctors literally pulled the man back from the brink of death, but they weren't able to save everyone. The approaching border guard's car illuminated the clearing with its headlights. Among the tents, anxious and frightened tourists were crowding together. Running out into the clearing, Edgar and Leo couldn't believe their eyes. Everywhere on the grass lay the bodies of men and women, scattered belongings, bandaged wounded, and relatives of the dead weeping over the bodies. Edgar Tommy cautiously neared the corpses of two familiar soldiers. They weren't saboteurs, they were his men. He bent over Nikolai Povishev and put his hand on his carotid artery. "He's still alive," Edgar shouted. Together with Leah, they lifted him up and carried him to the car. Turning around, Edgar shouted loudly to the people gathered in the clearing, "No one is to leave this place until further notice, and no calls to relatives or friends." People silently watched the departing UAZ, fear and confusion in their eyes. Could it really be that they were the criminals who opened fire on innocent people? Was no one supposed to know about the fear and horror they experienced that night? The car was racing at breakneck speed toward the Tartup hospital. While Leo was bandaging Nikolai Povishev, Lieutenant Colonel Edgar Tommy was thinking about how to get himself out of this incident. "How did he do it?" Edgar asked, turning around. "Not good. He lost a lot of blood," Leo replied. Edgar turned away and, frowning, pressed the gas pedal. At the hospital, the wounded man was immediately taken to the operating table. Edgar Tommy paced nervously around the ward, waiting for Leo to refuel the car. An elderly surgeon, wiping his glasses, approached the lieutenant colonel. "Would you like to explain what actually happened? Tonight, they've already brought us the 5th person with a gunshot wound, and all of them are from the gasworkers' camping trip in Letipea." Edgar Tommy looked at him grimly and said sternly, "That's classified information. You're not supposed to know that. You'd better stick to your direct duties." But a 16-year-old boy, Tanis Nurk, died there. "I'm personally acquainted with his parents. He died right on the operating table." "What was his fault? Who started this massacre, and for what reason?" "Those who came with him talk about 2 border guard soldiers who shot peaceful tourists with automatic rifles." Edgar couldn't take it anymore, and approaching the doctor, grabbed him by the collar. "My advice to you is, don't make a mistake. Don't get involved in matters that don't concern you." He abruptly let go and almost whispered, "When the soldier is able to speak, you will call me at the outpost immediately." Letting go of the doctor, he quickly left the ward. Captain Leo was waiting for him at the entrance. Already sitting in the car, Edgar nervously lit a cigarette. "Listen, Leo. When we get to the unit, I'll report what happened to headquarters, and if necessary, will you back up my words?" It was self-defense. "My soldiers were checking documents and the drunk gas workers attacked them. They had to use their service weapons. Consequently, one died and the other was gravely injured. But the tourists won't confirm this story, and how will you explain the gunshot wounds to the border guards from their own weapons? Let the investigators from the military prosecutor's office explain that. You don't want to go to court-martial because of this case, do you?" Leo looked closely at the lieutenant colonel. He was more serious than ever. "The case will be classified, and I really hope that no extra information leaks to the newspapers, since all the participants of the celebration signed a non-disclosure agreement. Right?" Leo was still silent. His hands gripped the steering wheel even tighter. "And when the soldier wakes up, I'll explain to him what he needs to say so that the blame falls on the gas workers." Leo stayed silent the whole way. The approaching car was led in through the checkpoint, and Lieutenant Colonel Tommy immediately rushed to the office, intending to report the incident at the gas workers' camp to his superiors. He heard a persistent ringing from the corridor.
Of the phone. Running in.
He grabbed the receiver and froze, listening to someone's anxious voice. Leo, who came in after him, heard the last words. "You can pick up the body tomorrow at any convenient time." The lieutenant colonel dropped the receiver and turned around. His face was deathly pale. His eyes seemed to look right through Leo. "He died on the operating table," Edgar Tommy said in a mechanical voice. "Comrade, Lieutenant Colonel Leo straightened up and raised his chin as if preparing to deliver an official report. I will only speak about what I saw with my own eyes, and I don't want to be involved in falsifying the facts. If I am punished, it will be deserved, but I will not tarnish my honor as an officer. Edgar Tommy seemed to wake up. His gaze became cold and piercing. His hand slowly moved to his holster and he drew his award Tokarev pistol. "Are you okay, son? Are you typing every word?" he asked. "Yes, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel," Leo replied. The hand holding the pistol slowly rose, the barrel aimed at him, and Leo froze, mesmerized, staring into the Lieutenant Colonel's eyes. "You understand that I have no choice, and I won't go before a firing squad tribunal," Edgar said quietly. The hand gripped the pistol so tightly the knuckles cracked. A large bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. His lips pressed together, and a loud grinding of teeth was heard. "Me too," Leo replied calmly. The Lieutenant Colonel suddenly raised his hand, and a shot rang out. Leo, as if in a fog, stared at the fallen commander. He was lying on his back with his arms spread wide, a large red hole gaping in his temple. Under his head, a dark red pool of blood was spreading, growing larger and larger. Lieutenant Letipea approached the corpse. His legs felt like cotton and his hands were trembling. Making an effort, he stepped over the body and, picking up the receiver, dialed the number. "Deputy Commander of the Border Outpost reporting. Number 3, Lieutenant Letipea. We have an emergency." His voice sounded loud and firm. Military leadership urgently flew to the emergency site from Moscow and Leningrad. Before the commission arrived, and before the investigation of the incident, the camp was cordoned off and tourists were strictly forbidden to leave it. The investigation into the shooting in the border zone was taken under personal control by the head of the KGB of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Yuri Andropov. He flew to the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. The chief Soviet security officer's first order was to classify all information about the tragedy and those responsible for it. That's why there were no publications about the shooting near the village of Letipea in Soviet newspapers. Only the Western radio stations Radio Liberty and Voice of America reported about it. But the state security agencies strictly monitored to make sure that rumors about the tragedy did not spread among the population. The families of the victims received compensation from the state budget of 150 rubles for each person who lost their life, as well as full coverage of all funeral expenses. A total of 7 people, aged 16 to 57, became victims of the massacre carried out by border guard Viktor Bagijev, not counting the shooter himself. According to various reports, between 14 and 18 people were injured. A wave of demonstrations and protests swept across the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. People demanded the removal of border posts and the disbandment of the personnel, but all of them were harshly suppressed by the police and the KGB of the Soviet Socialist Republic. The funerals of the 6 Estonians who lost their lives were held under the control of police officers and KGB agents. To avoid public unrest, a strictly designated time was set for the mourning ceremonies. The Soviet authorities tried to ban the funeral processions but faced strong resistance from the relatives of the deceased and backed down. However, at the school where the deceased Tinis Nork studied, the farewell ceremony, which was traditional in the event of a student's death, was still cancelled. Tinis's father was never able to come to terms with the heavy loss, says Andres Nurk, a participant in the Congress of Gas Industry Workers of the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. Young people died, and for their loved ones, it was a huge blow. My father took the death of his younger son so hard that he himself died 10 years later. In the official investigation documents, the Estonian tragedy was described as a domestic conflict involving the use of service automatic weapons. Due to the deaths of the main figures involved, their superiors were punished. The deputy commander of outpost number 3 was dismissed, while the senior commander of the outpost was not punished as he took his own life that same night. The administrator of the recreation center was held criminally liable for violating the regulations on selling alcohol to military personnel. The deputy head of Glavgaz Union of Soviet Socialist Republics responsible for the safety of the Congress, the head of Glavgaz Union of Soviet Socialist Republics Ada Pesur, received a party reprimand, while his superior Vsevolod Gerasimov and the leaders of the Rakvere district got off with warnings. But the Soviet authorities drew conclusions from what happened. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics border guards began to be on duty with unloaded automatic rifles, having received orders to use them if necessary. The personnel of the border detachments were formed almost entirely from Estonian soldiers. The command was also carried out by officers of Estonian origin. The sale of alcohol in summer camps was prohibited, as well as holding any mass events in border zones. In 1991, a memorial stone was installed in the clearing where the shooting took place. 5 years later, the names of all those killed by Viktor Bagijev's bullets were engraved on it. But the tragedy near the village of Letipea was far from the only one of its kind. Border guards had distinguished themselves before in the Estonian Soviet Socialist Republic. So, in 1968, on the island of Vilsandi, 27-year-old deputy commander of the Border Corps Dobrodev shot and killed someone with a Makarov pistol during a conflict at a dinner party. Meteorologist May Lambut and lighthouse commander Lembit Kivi. The shooter was sentenced to execution, which was later commuted to 15 years in prison and 4 years later. A similar incident occurred on the island of Saaremaa in 1972. One of the border guards got drunk and went to see his girlfriend, with whom he had argued the day before. Bursting into her house, the soldier tried to assault her, and her mother and 2 sisters rushed to her defense. Then the border guard opened fire on them, shooting all 4, and then took his own life. And what do you think about this case? Write comments, leave likes, dislikes, hit the bell, and subscribe to Telegram's Trash Naughty. There's a unique atmosphere there, even more content, and I provide sources and additional materials, including for this video.